Welcome back, Mindsetters. Wow, you guys are actually really on the ball today. What's more fantastic is that you guys are helping each other. It is absolutely awesome. And if you guys need extra help, remember that the page is always free and empty, so you can keep asking questions, and you learners can keep helping each other even through the night and in the morning when we are not here. And you can even make it a step further and actually get each other's contact numbers and sit and chat about these things, have study groups and all that. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? Over to you again.
Thanks, Katleko. Some interesting questions that you guys have posted. We're gonna tackle those questions once we go through some of the questions that I've got up. And if you think that I'm going a bit too fast, Katleko's been good enough. She's been kind enough to put up those notes for you guys, so you guys can refer to those notes. But we will try and answer these questions and then get to your questions at the end of these questions. So I want you guys to interact with me, and if you can post some of your answers, let's see. Okay. So the first question. So study the diagram and answer the questions below. Here we've got a diagram showing a springbuck and different components. Whenever you see a diagram, the first thing you should do is try and identify and label the diagram before we attempt to answer the questions. Okay, so obviously label number 1 would point to the atmosphere. Label number 2 points to the hydrosphere, and label number 3 points to the lithosphere. Okay, so let's look at the first question. Give the correct scientific term for the following: the soil and rocks forming the upper surface of the earth. We've done that already. And the answer to that question would be the lithosphere. Give the correct scientific term for the portion of the earth in which living organisms are found. And that's what we've been doing since the start of this lesson. And that would be the biosphere. Okay, we're going to go back. I'm going to take that question. Okay, I've messed up on this question here. Name the parts. Okay, before we... Okay, right. So name the parts labeled number 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 points to the atmosphere. Number 2 to the hydrosphere. And number 3 points to the lithosphere. Okay. We've answered those questions. Okay, the next question. And this is a question that relates to the impact of humans have had on the environment. Okay, so the question is, how can the release of sulfur dioxide in part 1, which is the atmosphere, affect parts 2 and 3? Okay, I'm going to extend the page. So the question basically wants us to establish what will the effect of sulfur dioxide in part 1, which is the atmosphere, affect parts 2 and 3. So let's look at what sulfur dioxide is. So sulfur dioxide is a gas. Where's sulfur dioxide emitted from? So it's emitted from your factories, it's emitted from car exhaust, and this is a pollutant. So it's a pollutant that pollutes the atmosphere. Sulfur dioxide will combine with water. So we have water plus sulfur dioxide, which forms H2SO4. Well, guys, you don't have to be a brilliant science student to know this, even if you don't. Okay, we need to understand that water plus sulfur dioxide forms H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid. Yes, an acid. So what would the impact of an acid be? So acids obviously would have a pH of 1 to 6.9. An acid could be strong or it could be weak. So what happens with sulfur dioxide as it gets into the atmosphere? Okay, so the sulfur dioxide plus the water in the atmosphere form sulfuric acid, and that then enters into the water bodies, polluting the water bodies, and enters into the ground, polluting the ground. What would happen to the pH of the water? The water will become slightly acidic. What would happen to the pH of the soil? The pH of the soil would change. That will also become acidic, meaning that the plants that rely on the soil for their nutrition, for the water, would be affected by the change in pH. So, how can the release of sulfur dioxide in parts number 1 affect 2 and 3? We would see that it would affect plant growth, it would affect the aquatic organisms that are living in these water bodies, and hence these organisms will not function, they will not survive effectively. Okay. The next question. Study the diagram and answer the questions below. Give the correct sign. We've done that. Let's move on to the next question, guys. We've done that as well. Let's look at the next question. Think of a rural village or farm and explain how the carbon cycle works there. Now, essentially, we've got to look at the activities that happen in a farm or in a rural area, and what are the producers of carbon dioxide. So, in a farm, you would find that cattle would produce large amounts of carbon dioxide. Removing of trees, deforestation, these contribute significantly to the reduction of the trees, and these will not then compensate for the changes in the carbon dioxide level. So this is a 5-mark question. Let's see how you would answer this question. So think of the rural village and explain how the carbon cycle works there. So if we go back to our carbon cycle, we see that the main contributors of the carbon would be the animals and humans. So the cattle will produce carbon dioxide. The farm machinery, so the farm machines that rely on petrol, these produce carbon dioxide. If a farmer was removing trees to create more space for agricultural land, deforestation. This will contribute to increased levels of carbon dioxide. And hence, you'll find that carbon dioxide levels will definitely be affected by human activity. If we go on to the next question, think of the center of a developed city like Johannesburg or even Cape Town and explain how the carbon cycle works there. This would be very different because of industrialization, because of mechanization, transportation. We have large factors that contribute to increase carbon dioxide levels, and hence we would need to answer this question looking at what contributes significantly to increase carbon dioxide emissions in these areas. Okay, so in a town, in a city, what would be the contributors of carbon dioxide? Firstly, so it would be transportation. So transport systems. You know that because these are cosmopolitan cities, you have large amounts of carbon dioxide being produced by motor vehicles. We also have several industries, and these industries contribute to carbon dioxide levels as well. Okay. And obviously the last question, and I'd like to pose this question to you so that you could think about what you can do to reduce your carbon impact. How can people living in both these areas reduce the amount of carbon dioxide going into the air? And essentially this is the impact that you and I have on the environment. And the simple things that we could do would be planting trees, reducing the amount of fossil fuels that are burnt, indirectly or directly. I know there were a few more questions that we've had. We're going to take a few questions and try and answer them in the last few minutes of this program.
Okay. Deborah has a question. Are the secondary consumers herbivores or carnivores?
If we look at secondary consumers would essentially be organisms that feed off the primary consumers. For example, a primary consumer would be a sheep. A secondary consumer would be an organism that would feed off a sheep. Often, secondary consumers are not omnivores. An omnivore is an organism that feeds both on plant as well as on other herbivores, and hence an organism like a monkey, a chimpanzee could be classified as an omnivore, as opposed to a secondary consumer like a leopard, which exclusively feeds on a herbivore.
Okay. And then there's one that I think is just for clarity. What portion of the earth in which living organisms are found? Which portion of the earth? I think you meant.
Which portion of the earth are living organisms found? Well, the earth will essentially support living organisms in the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, and the atmosphere, with the bulk of the organisms being found in the aquatic, because obviously that takes up the largest portion of the surface of the earth.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you, Mindsetters. You guys were absolutely awesome today. And these questions really do show us that you guys are absolutely focused with us. Thank you for an awesome show. Remember, Life Sciences will be again next week, Wednesday, same time, same place. Bye, guys.